Standing in my doorway at 7 in the morning, watching my mother drive away after literally shoving my brother's three screaming children into my apartment, I realized everything I thought I knew about family loyalty was a lie. She had just told me that since I was unemployed, babysitting was my new unpaid career. What she did not know was that I had already discovered the real reason she wanted me out of the way today. The family meeting happening in 2 hours was not about planning Dad's birthday party like she claimed. It was about dividing his estate while secretly having him declared mentally incompetent, and I was the only one not invited. Before we dive into this family betrayal story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If this hook already has your heart racing about family drama and hidden schemes, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this revenge story is about to get absolutely wild. Trust me, you will want to see how this manipulation backfires spectacularly. My name is Serafina, and until that morning I genuinely believed my family valued honesty above everything else. I had been unemployed for exactly 3 weeks after my marketing company downsized, but I was actively job hunting and had several promising interviews lined up. My mother, Patricia, had always been the family organizer, the one who coordinated holidays and kept everyone connected. My older brother, Marcus, seemed like the responsible eldest child married with 3 kids working as an accountant. My father, Richard, was a retired engineer who had built a successful consulting business and accumulated substantial wealth over 40 years. The morning started when Patricia called at 6:30, claiming there was a childcare emergency. Marcus and his wife supposedly had to rush to the hospital because she was having pregnancy complications with their fourth child. They needed someone to watch 8-year-old Tyler, 5-year-old Emma, and 3-year-old Lily immediately. As the unemployed family member, I was the obvious choice for emergency babysitting duty. When Patricia arrived with the children, something felt wrong immediately. Tyler was confused about why they were staying with me instead of going to school. Emma kept asking when Mommy was coming back from her spa day. Lily mentioned something about Daddy having an important meeting with lawyers. These details did not match the hospital emergency story at all. After Patricia left, I started putting pieces together. Marcus had been unusually interested in Dad's financial situation lately, asking pointed questions about his investments and property during family dinners. He had suggested Dad might be getting forgetful and maybe needed help managing his affairs. Patricia had been agreeing enthusiastically, mentioning how Dad sometimes repeated stories or seemed confused about dates. I decided to call Dad directly to check on him. When he answered, he sounded completely normal and alert. He was confused about why I was asking about his health and mentioned he was getting ready for some kind of family meeting that Patricia had organized. He thought it was about planning his 75th birthday celebration next month. When I asked if I was invited, there was a long pause. He said he assumed I knew about it and that Patricia had probably forgotten to call me since I had been stressed about job hunting. The realization hit me like ice water. There was no hospital emergency. Marcus's wife was not having complications. This was a deliberate setup to keep me away from whatever was really happening at that family meeting. I started thinking about recent conversations and behaviors that suddenly made sense in a sinister new context. 3 months ago, Marcus had suggested Dad get a comprehensive medical evaluation because he seemed to be slowing down mentally. Patricia had enthusiastically supported this idea, mentioning how important it was to catch cognitive decline early. They had both offered to help Dad find the right doctors and handle his appointment scheduling. At the time, it seemed caring and responsible. 2 months ago, Patricia had started making comments about how difficult it must be for Dad to manage his finances alone since Mom died 5 years earlier. She suggested he might benefit from having someone help him organize his paperwork and make sure bills were paid on time. Marcus had offered to review Dad's financial situation and help streamline his accounts for easier management. Last month, both Marcus and Patricia had become very interested in Dad's estate planning. They asked whether he had updated his will recently and suggested he might want to consider setting up trusts or other arrangements to protect his assets. They offered to help him find an estate planning attorney and accompany him to appointments to make sure he understood all the legal details. Now I understood these conversations were not motivated by genuine concern for Dad's well-being. They were systematic preparation for some kind of financial takeover. The family meeting happening today was clearly the next step in whatever scheme they had been developing. I felt sick thinking about how they had manipulated me into believing I was helping with a family emergency while actually using me as free childcare so they could execute their plan without interference. The betrayal felt personal and calculated. They had counted on my unemployment making me available and desperate enough to accept emergency babysitting without questioning the story too carefully. But they had made one critical mistake. They underestimated my ability to figure out what was really happening and my determination to protect Dad from whatever they were planning. I spent 20 minutes calming the children with cartoons and snacks, while my mind raced through possible responses. The family meeting was starting in an hour and a half, which gave me a narrow window to act. I needed to understand exactly what Marcus and Patricia were planning before I could figure out how to stop them. First, I called Dad back and asked him to describe exactly what Patricia had told him about today's meeting. He explained she had said the whole family would gather to discuss his birthday party plans and maybe talk about some paperwork that needed organizing. She had specifically mentioned that I would not be there because I was dealing with job interview stress and did not need additional family obligations right now. The manipulation was breathtaking in its calculated cruelty. They had used my unemployment as an excuse to exclude me while simultaneously exploiting it to make me available for childcare duty. Every detail had been designed to keep me occupied and uninformed while they moved forward with their agenda. I asked Dad whether he had signed any legal documents recently or agreed to any new financial arrangements. There was another long pause before he admitted that Marcus had brought some paperwork last week related to estate planning and medical directives. Dad had signed several documents after Marcus explained they were standard forms to protect his assets and ensure his wishes would be respected if he ever became unable to make decisions himself. My stomach dropped. They had already gotten Dad to sign legal documents without fully understanding what he was agreeing to. The family meeting today was probably about implementing whatever authority those documents had granted them. I made a quick decision that would change everything. Instead of calling to confront Marcus and Patricia directly, I decided to show up at the meeting unexpectedly, with Dad's grandchildren in tow. If they were planning something legitimate, they should have no problem explaining their plans in front of Dad and dealing with the childcare situation they had created. If they were planning something deceptive, my presence would force them to either reveal their true intentions or abort their scheme entirely. I loaded the three children into my car, telling them we were going to surprise Grandpa and their daddy with an unexpected visit. Tyler was excited about seeing Grandpa. Emma wanted to show him a drawing she had made at my apartment. Lily just wanted to find her favorite stuffed animal that she had apparently left at Grandpa's house. The drive to Dad's house took 15 minutes, during which I called my college friend Jessica, who worked as a paralegal at an estate planning law firm. I quickly explained the situation and asked whether there were legal documents that could give family members authority over someone's finances without that person fully understanding what they were signing. Jessica's response was both informative and terrifying. She explained that power of attorney documents, medical directives, and certain trust arrangements could potentially give family members significant control over an elderly person's assets and medical decisions. If someone was manipulative enough, they could present these documents as routine estate planning while actually granting themselves authority to make major financial decisions, or even have someone declared incompetent. She strongly advised me to make sure Dad understood exactly what any documents he had signed actually meant, and to consider having an independent attorney review them immediately. She also mentioned that if there was evidence of manipulation or fraud, there could be serious legal consequences for the people involved. When I arrived at Dad's house, I could see Marcus's car and Patricia's car in the driveway. I took a deep breath, gathered the children, and walked straight to the front door. I had my key, so I let myself in without knocking. The scene I discovered in Dad's living room confirmed my worst fears and provided me with ammunition I had not expected. Marcus was sitting at the dining table with a stack of legal documents spread out in front of him. Patricia was on the phone with someone discussing appointment times and medical evaluations. A man I did not recognize was sitting across from Marcus, wearing a suit and taking notes on a legal pad. All three adults froze when they saw me walk in with the children. Marcus's face went pale. Patricia immediately ended her phone call. The stranger started gathering up his papers with obvious discomfort. Dad came out of the kitchen and was genuinely delighted to see his grandchildren. He scooped up Lily and asked Tyler about school and Emma about her drawing. He was clearly alert, engaged, and mentally sharp. There was absolutely nothing about his behavior that suggested cognitive decline or mental incapacity. The contrast between Dad's obvious competence and the legal documents spread across his table created a damning visual that spoke louder than any accusation I could have made. I looked directly at Marcus and asked in a clear, calm voice, "So there was no hospital emergency with your wife, no pregnancy complications that required emergency childcare this morning?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Marcus stammered something about plans changing. Patricia started explaining that they had decided to combine the emergency childcare with the family meeting for convenience. The man in the suit was clearly uncomfortable being present for what was obviously a family confrontation. But I was just getting started, and I had 3 confused children and 1 alert father as witnesses to whatever truth was about to emerge. The stranger introduced himself as Robert Coleman, an attorney specializing in elder law and estate planning. When I asked him directly what kind of legal business he was conducting with my family, the uncomfortable silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Marcus finally admitted they were discussing options for protecting Dad's assets and ensuring his medical care wishes would be respected as he got older. I asked Dad whether he had requested this attorney consultation or whether someone else had arranged it. Dad looked confused and said he thought they were meeting to discuss birthday party planning, though he was not sure why they needed an attorney for that purpose. When I asked him to explain what he understood about the documents he had signed last week, his explanation made it clear he had been told they were routine paperwork to organize his affairs, not legal instruments that could grant decision-making authority to other people. The attorney, clearly recognizing he had been brought into a potentially unethical situation, began explaining the actual legal implications of the documents Dad had signed. Power of attorney for financial decisions. Medical directives that could allow family members to override Dad's stated preferences under certain circumstances. Trust arrangements that could transfer asset control while claiming to protect Dad's interests. As the attorney spoke, I watched Dad's expression change from confusion to concern to growing anger. He started asking pointed questions about whether these documents meant Marcus and Patricia could make decisions about his money and medical care without his input. The attorney's careful responses confirmed Dad's worst fears and my suspicions about the scope of the manipulation. Tyler, who had been listening to the adult conversation with typical 8-year-old curiosity, suddenly asked a question that cut through all the legal complexity. "Daddy, why did you tell Aunt Sarah that Mommy was in the hospital when she is really at the spa today?" The innocent question from his own son destroyed Marcus's credibility completely. Emma chimed in helpfully that Mommy had been excited about her spa day and massage appointment all week. Lily mentioned that Daddy had told them they were going to stay with Aunt Sarah while he went to an important meeting about money. Out of the mouths of babes came the truth that exposed the entire deception. There had never been a hospital emergency. The childcare arrangement had been planned in advance to ensure I would be unavailable during the legal consultation. Everything about the morning had been a calculated manipulation designed to advance their scheme while keeping me in the dark. Dad's anger was building rapidly as he realized how extensively he had been deceived by his own family members. He demanded to know what other lies they had told him and what other documents they had pressured him to sign under false pretenses. The attorney was now clearly worried about potential legal liability for his participation in what appeared to be elder manipulation. I made a strategic decision to propose an immediate solution that would protect Dad and expose the full extent of their deception. I suggested that Dad should have an independent attorney review all the documents he had signed before any additional legal arrangements were finalized. I also suggested that Dad should have an independent medical evaluation to establish his mental competency, since that appeared to be a concern Marcus and Patricia had raised. Patricia immediately objected that Dad did not need to spend money on unnecessary legal fees when they were just trying to help him organize his affairs responsibly. Marcus argued that bringing in outside professionals would just complicate a simple family matter and create conflict where none existed. Their resistance to independent oversight was revealing and provided me with additional evidence of their deceptive intentions. If they were genuinely concerned about Dad's well-being, they should welcome professional verification that he was competent to make his own decisions and that any legal arrangements were truly in his best interests. Dad, now fully alert to the manipulation he had experienced, announced that he wanted all the documents he had signed to be reviewed by an independent attorney before any of them took effect. He also said he wanted a medical evaluation from a doctor he chose himself, not someone Marcus and Patricia recommended. The attorney Coleman began explaining the process for revoking power of attorney documents and halting trust arrangements that had been signed under potentially fraudulent circumstances. He seemed relieved to be helping correct a situation that had clearly made him uncomfortable from the beginning. But I knew this confrontation was just the opening move in what would likely be a much longer battle. Marcus and Patricia had invested significant time and effort into their scheme, and they were not going to give up easily just because they had been exposed. I needed to build a stronger support network to protect Dad and ensure they could not retaliate against me for interfering with their plans. I asked Dad whether he would be comfortable having Jessica, my paralegal friend, recommend an independent attorney who specialized in elder law and had experience dealing with family financial manipulation. I also suggested we should document everything that had happened today, including the deceptive childcare arrangement and the misleading information Dad had been given about the legal documents. Dad agreed enthusiastically and asked me to stay involved in reviewing all his legal and financial arrangements to make sure he understood exactly what he was agreeing to in the future. He apologized for being deceived and thanked me for protecting him from what could have been a devastating financial betrayal. Marcus and Patricia were furious about losing control of their carefully planned scheme, but they could not openly object to Dad seeking independent legal advice without revealing their manipulative intentions even more clearly. The battle lines were now clearly drawn, but I had allies, and Dad was fully aware of the threat he faced from his own family members. Over the next 2 weeks, I thought I had built an unbreakable support system around Dad. Jessica had recommended an excellent elder law attorney named David Martinez, who specialized in cases involving family financial manipulation. Dad had undergone a comprehensive cognitive evaluation with a geriatrician who confirmed he was mentally sharp and fully capable of managing his own affairs. We had documentation proving the deceptive circumstances under which the original documents had been signed. Most importantly, I had recruited what I believed was a crucial ally in my cousin Rebecca, Patricia's younger sister. Rebecca had always seemed like the reasonable family member who stayed out of drama and focused on her successful real estate career. When I called her to explain what Marcus and Patricia had attempted, she expressed shock and outrage at their betrayal of Dad's trust. Rebecca offered to help gather evidence of their deceptive behavior and suggested she could approach other family members who might have witnessed suspicious conversations or activities. She seemed genuinely committed to protecting Dad and ensuring Marcus and Patricia faced consequences for their manipulation. I felt relieved to have someone else in the family who understood the seriousness of what had happened. Rebecca attended several meetings with Dad's new attorney and provided helpful insights about family dynamics that seemed relevant to building a strong case. She helped document previous occasions when Marcus and Patricia had made concerning comments about Dad's mental state or financial management abilities. She offered to testify about conversations where they had discussed strategies for gaining more influence over Dad's decisions. I began to trust Rebecca completely and shared detailed information about our legal strategy and the evidence we were collecting. When she suggested we should gather more documentation about Dad's assets and financial accounts to prove he was managing them competently, it seemed like practical advice. When she offered to help Dad organize his important papers and make copies of key documents for his attorney, I thought it demonstrated helpful family support. The betrayal came exactly 3 weeks after the initial confrontation. I arrived at Dad's house for what I thought was a routine meeting with his attorney to review the progress of revoking the fraudulent documents. Instead, I found Marcus, Patricia, and Rebecca sitting in the living room with a different attorney and a stack of new legal papers. Dad looked confused and upset. Rebecca avoided making eye contact with me. Marcus had a satisfied smirk that made my stomach turn. Patricia looked triumphant in a way that terrified me. The new attorney introduced himself as Gregory Walsh and explained that he represented Marcus, Patricia, and Rebecca in their petition to have Dad declared mentally incompetent due to his recent erratic behavior and poor financial decisions. According to their petition, Dad's decision to revoke properly executed legal documents and hire an unnecessary attorney demonstrated impaired judgment that endangered his well-being and assets. Rebecca, my trusted ally and Dad's supposed protector, had been gathering evidence for the past 3 weeks to support their competency challenge. Every document I had asked her to help organize, every detail I had shared about our legal strategy, every conversation about Dad's assets had been reported back to Marcus and Patricia. She had been a spy from the beginning. The betrayal was devastating on multiple levels. Rebecca had access to information about Dad's financial accounts that she had used to create a misleading picture of mismanagement and confusion. She had documented instances where Dad seemed uncertain about financial details, ignoring the context that he was learning his own family had been deceiving him about legal documents. She had twisted his reasonable decision to seek independent legal advice into evidence of paranoia and poor judgment. Worst of all, Rebecca had convinced Dad to sign new documents that she claimed would protect him from future manipulation. These documents, I now learned, granted her temporary authority to manage his affairs while the competency evaluation was pending. Dad had trusted her completely because she seemed to be protecting him from Marcus and Patricia, not realizing she was actually working with them to achieve the same goal through a different strategy. The new attorney explained that Dad would need to undergo another mental health evaluation conducted by doctors chosen by the petitioners rather than his own physician. During this evaluation period, Rebecca would have authority to make necessary financial and medical decisions to protect his interests. Any attempt to interfere with this legal process could be considered obstruction and might result in legal action against me personally. I felt sick realizing how completely I had been outmaneuvered. By trusting Rebecca and sharing information freely, I had provided them with everything they needed to create a more sophisticated and legally defensible version of their original scheme. Dad's mental competency, which had seemed like our strongest defense, was now being questioned based on evidence Rebecca had systematically collected while pretending to help us. Dad looked at Rebecca with heartbroken confusion and asked whether she had really been working against him the entire time. Her response was a masterpiece of manipulation disguised as concern. She explained that she had initially supported his decision to seek independent legal advice, but had become worried about his judgment after observing his paranoid suspicions about family members who were trying to help him. She claimed she was acting in his best interests by ensuring he received proper medical evaluation and temporary protection from making impulsive decisions that could harm his financial security. The legal trap was elegant and seemingly airtight. They had used my own efforts to protect Dad as evidence that he needed protection from me. They had positioned Rebecca as the reasonable family member who tried to support Dad's independence but recognized when intervention became necessary. They had created documentation showing Dad's alleged mental decline while simultaneously preventing him from taking actions they could later claim proved his incompetence. Standing in Dad's living room, surrounded by his own family members who had systematically betrayed his trust, I realized that everything I thought I had accomplished in the past 3 weeks had actually made the situation worse. Dad was now facing a formal competency challenge with more legal complexity and family testimony against him. I had been isolated as the problem family member whose interference was causing Dad's distress and confusion. But as I looked at Dad's face and saw his determination rather than defeat, I realized that Rebecca and her co-conspirators had made a critical error in their calculations. They had assumed that betrayal and legal manipulation would break our resolve. Instead, they had shown us exactly how far they were willing to go and provided us with new evidence of their coordinated deception. The next 72 hours were the darkest period of the entire ordeal, but they also led to the breakthrough that ultimately destroyed Marcus, Patricia, and Rebecca's scheme completely. I felt helpless watching Dad struggle with the knowledge that even family members who seemed trustworthy were willing to betray him for financial gain. The temporary restraining order Rebecca had obtained prevented me from being alone with Dad or discussing legal matters with him directly. But David Martinez, Dad's independent attorney, was furious about the coordinated deception and determined to expose the fraud that had been perpetrated against his client. He immediately filed counter-motions challenging the competency petition and demanding full disclosure of all communications between the family members involved in the scheme. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source that none of us had considered. Tyler Marcus's 8-year-old son had been staying with my neighbor Mrs. Chen during the day while the adults were dealing with legal meetings. Mrs. Chen mentioned to me that Tyler had been talking about conversations he had overheard between his parents, Aunt Rebecca and Grandma Patricia, over the past several months. According to Tyler's innocent recollections, the adults had been meeting regularly at Marcus's house on Sunday evenings to discuss the Grandpa plan. Tyler had heard them talking about getting Grandpa to sign papers, finding doctors who would say he was sick in his brain, and making sure Aunt Sarah could not interfere with their important business. He had heard Rebecca practicing conversations she planned to have with me about helping Grandpa, and he had heard Patricia discussing which attorney would be best for their backup plan. Mrs. Chen, who had worked as a court reporter for 30 years before retiring, understood immediately that Tyler's testimony could provide crucial evidence of premeditation and conspiracy. She helped me document his statements carefully and explained how child testimony could be used in elder abuse cases when it revealed adult planning and coordination. More importantly, Mrs. Chen revealed that she was not just my neighbor, but also the former business partner of Judge Margaret Fitzgerald, who specialized in elder law cases in our county. Mrs. Chen offered to reach out to her former colleague about the case and provide context about the family dynamics she had observed from her unique position as Tyler's temporary caregiver. When David Martinez learned about Tyler's testimony and Mrs. Chen's professional background, he immediately recognized the game-changing potential of this evidence. Child testimony about overheard adult conversations could prove the conspiracy that had been carefully hidden from Dad and other family members. Mrs. Chen's professional credibility and relationship with Judge Fitzgerald could provide crucial context for understanding the manipulation tactics involved. The legal counterattack began within days. David Martinez filed motions demanding all electronic communications between Marcus, Patricia, and Rebecca over the past 6 months. He subpoenaed Rebecca's real estate business records to determine whether she had been researching Dad's property values while pretending to help organize his affairs. He requested phone records that would show the frequency and timing of calls between the conspirators during the period when they were supposedly concerned about Dad's mental health. Most devastatingly, he petitioned for Tyler to be interviewed by a child advocate about the conversations he had overheard regarding the Grandpa plan. Tyler's innocent and detailed recollections of adult planning sessions provided evidence of premeditation that transformed the case from a family disagreement about Dad's competency into a potential criminal matter involving elder abuse and fraud. But the ultimate ally who emerged to secure our victory was Dad himself. The betrayal by Rebecca had crystallized his understanding of how extensively his own family had been willing to deceive him for financial gain. Instead of becoming confused or intimidated by the legal complexity, Dad became determined to fight back with every resource at his disposal. Dad revealed that he had been secretly recording conversations with family members ever since the initial confrontation in his living room. He had been carrying a small digital recorder in his pocket during every interaction with Marcus, Patricia, and Rebecca, creating an audio record of their attempts to manipulate him into accepting the competency evaluation and trusting Rebecca's temporary authority over his affairs. These recordings captured Rebecca's deceptive conversations about protecting Dad from Marcus and Patricia while actually coordinating with them. They documented Patricia's attempts to convince Dad that his decision to hire an independent attorney proved he was becoming paranoid and confused. They recorded Marcus making veiled threats about the consequences Dad would face if he continued to resist their reasonable efforts to help him manage his affairs responsibly. Most damaging of all, the recordings captured a conversation between Rebecca and Patricia where they discussed their frustration that Dad was being more resistant than they had expected, and their need to accelerate the timeline for gaining legal control over his assets before he could cause more problems for their plan. When David Martinez presented these recordings along with Tyler's testimony and the documentary evidence of coordination between the three conspirators, the case collapsed immediately. The competency petition was withdrawn, Rebecca's temporary authority was revoked, and the original fraudulent documents were officially declared invalid due to the deceptive circumstances under which they had been obtained. But Dad was not satisfied with simply winning the legal battle. He wanted Marcus, Patricia, and Rebecca to face real consequences for their attempt to steal his autonomy and assets through systematic deception and manipulation. The final collapse of their scheme was more complete and devastating than I could have imagined. Within 2 weeks of the recordings being presented to the court, Marcus, Patricia, and Rebecca found themselves facing serious legal consequences that extended far beyond the failed competency petition. The district attorney's office launched a criminal investigation into elder abuse and financial fraud based on the evidence of premeditation and conspiracy that Tyler's testimony and Dad's recordings had provided. The systematic nature of their deception, combined with Rebecca's abuse of her professional position as a real estate agent to research Dad's property values while gaining his trust, elevated their actions to felony-level charges. Rebecca's real estate license was suspended, pending investigation by the state licensing board. Her business reputation was destroyed when news of her involvement in elder abuse became public through court filings. Marcus faced potential charges related to his role in preparing fraudulent financial documents and using his accounting background to create misleading assessments of Dad's mental capacity. Patricia was charged with conspiracy and elder manipulation for orchestrating the entire scheme. But the personal consequences were even more satisfying than the legal ones. Dad revised his will to exclude Marcus and Patricia, entirely leaving their portions of his estate to legitimate elder abuse prevention organizations. He established a trust specifically designed to fund legal assistance for other elderly people facing family financial manipulation. Rebecca was permanently banned from any contact with Dad or involvement in his affairs. The 3 children who had been used as pawns in the original deception were removed from the toxic family dynamics entirely. Marcus's wife, who had genuinely been unaware of his scheme, filed for divorce and sought full custody to protect her children from his influence. Tyler, Emma, and Lily began spending weekends with Dad and me, building healthy relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation. Dad flourished once the stress and uncertainty of dealing with family betrayal was removed from his life. He sold his large family home and moved into a beautiful senior community where he quickly made friends and became involved in activities that brought him genuine joy. His mental sharpness and physical health improved dramatically once he was free from the constant anxiety of wondering which family members he could trust. For me, the experience led to unexpected personal growth and a chosen family that was stronger than the biological family that had betrayed us. Mrs. Chen became a surrogate grandmother figure who provided wisdom and support throughout the legal process. David Martinez became not just Dad's attorney, but a trusted family friend who helped us navigate other legal matters. Jessica's professional network connected us with other families who had survived similar elder abuse situations. Most surprisingly, the ordeal led to a career change that gave my life new purpose and meaning. The marketing skills I had developed in my previous job proved invaluable for creating awareness campaigns about elder abuse prevention. I started working with the organizations that Dad's trust funded, developing educational materials and support systems for families dealing with financial manipulation. 6 months after that terrible morning, when Patricia dumped Marcus's children at my door, I was running a nonprofit organization dedicated to elder abuse prevention. Dad was happier and more secure than he had been in years, and our chosen family was thriving. Marcus, Patricia, and Rebecca were dealing with criminal charges, destroyed reputations, and the knowledge that their greed had cost them everything they claimed to value about family relationships. The justice was not just legal, but deeply personal. They had counted on family loyalty and social pressure to prevent Dad from fighting back against their manipulation. Instead, their betrayal had stripped away any obligation we felt to protect them from the consequences of their actions. They had created their own downfall through their greed and willingness to exploit the trust of someone who had loved them unconditionally. Looking back, I realized that their scheme had been doomed from the moment they underestimated Dad's intelligence and my determination to protect him. They had confused temporary unemployment with permanent weakness. They had mistaken kindness for naivety. They had assumed that family bonds would prevent us from seeking justice when those same bonds were what motivated us to fight back. The experience taught me that real family is defined by loyalty, honesty, and genuine care for each other's well-being, not by shared DNA or legal relationships. Dad and I built a chosen family with people who earned our trust through their actions rather than demanding it through genetic connection. We learned that justice is not always immediate, but it is inevitable for people who systematically exploit and betray the trust of those who love them. As I finish sharing this story with you, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever experienced family betrayal or manipulation that made you question everything you believed about blood loyalty? How did you find the strength to fight back when people you trusted tried to exploit your love for them? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because these conversations help other people realize they are not alone in facing family manipulation and abuse. If this story of family karma and justice served, resonated with your own experiences, or opened your eyes to tactics that manipulative family members use, please hit that like button to help other people find this content. Subscribe to my channel for more stories about standing up to family abuse and building chosen families based on genuine love and respect, rather than obligation and guilt. Share this video with anyone who might be dealing with similar family dynamics, because sometimes people need to hear that it is okay to fight back against family members who exploit their trust and love. Thank you so much for listening to my story and supporting my mission to help families recognize and respond to manipulation and abuse. Remember that you deserve relationships built on honesty, respect, and genuine care for your well-being. Family members who truly love you will never use manipulation, deception, or threats to control your life or steal your autonomy. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Seek independent support when you need it, and never feel guilty about protecting yourself from people who would exploit your love for them, regardless of their relationship to you.